I see the slides.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We just want to give everyone about a minute or two to continue logging on. Wanted to make note of our July Town Hall where we will be talking about the C.R.O.W.N Act as well as Dr. Kimbrel will be interviewing our panelists. And please forgive me if I butcher your name, Adjoa Asamoah. We want to introduce her, say welcome, and we'll be starting here in a few minutes.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. While we wait, Adjoa, would you mind pronouncing your name just because I want to make sure I get it right?
No problem. It is Adjoa B. Asamoah.
Asamoah. Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Of course, happy to be here.
Happy to have you.
Again, good morning, or good afternoon at this point, and welcome everyone to our July Town Hall, where we will be focusing on the C.R.O.W.N Act as well as talking about the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, which the anniversary is in July, as well as just some social wellness. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Amber, for introducing us, and welcome everyone to our second town hall. We are so happy to have you guys again with us today and talk about some very, very important topics. So again, thank you. We have some great things in store for you today. One of those being our guest speaker, Adjoa B. Asamoah. And I want to start by doing a introduction. She has a wonderfully impressive background, very inspiring. So I want to share that with you. And then we kind of want to start with getting into the C.R.O.W.N Act and what it is. These are just some housekeeping rules, just the same as last time. You will have the opportunity to ask questions and have your voice be heard throughout the duration of our webinar today. So please feel free to chat those questions in, and we'll be happy to address those as we go throughout the training. as we go throughout the webinar. So I want to start with just introducing our guest. Adjoa B. Asamoah is an award-winning social impact strategist, international influencer, and leading authority on racial equity with expertise that includes leveraging cultural intelligence and behavior psychology to create meaningful systems change and winning campaigns. She was tapped by the Biden-Harris campaign to serve as the National Advisor for Black Engagement and was the African American Engagement Director for the Presidential Inaugural Committee. She serves as a trusted advisor to numerous federal, state, and local officials, and she is highly sought after to develop diverse coalitions and liaison between communities and organizations. As a foremost thought leader and policy architect, she has spearheaded legislative victories to create an Office of Racial Equity, codify the nation's first Office of African American Affairs, and to introduce and pass the historic Anti-Hair Discrimination C.R.O.W.N. Act, which we will be learning more about today. Ultimately, Adjoa is the go-to change agent to mobilize leaders and communities for thoughtful, collective, social, and political action. Debunking the "you can't master many trades" myth, Adjoa chairs the Democratic National Committee's African American Leadership Council and has trained women across the political, ideological spectrum at American University's Women and Political Institute. Her cultural capital and influential global network has resulted in her being tapped by media companies like BET and Sirius XM to serve as a guest host, and her work can be viewed on radio, TV, and in print. She is also a frequent guest lecturer at Howard University, was a teaching assistant at Temple University, and served as an adjunct professor at C.R.O.W.N. University. As faculty, she has taught courses in both psychology and African American studies. She has provided subject matter expertise as an appointee to numerous national commissions, committees, boards, think tanks, and advisory councils for notable organizations like the NAACP and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, to National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated. She was also appointed by multiple DC superintendents to the federally mandated State Committee of Practitioners, and she has been elected as chair for 4 consecutive years. DC Mayor appointed Adjoa to be a senior policy advisor, managing the equity portfolio and to the Commission on African American Affairs, serving as the highest ranking elected member. Whew. You go, girl. You go, girl. She earned her undergraduate degrees in psychology and African American studies and a master's degree in educational psychology from Temple University, a postmaster's certificate in applied behavior analysis from St. Joseph's University, and she holds many licenses, including one as a behavior specialist. Adjoa was an international student at the University of Ghana and as an alumni of the Women's Campaign School of Yale University. She completed the UPenn Equity Institute for Doctoral Students at the Center for the Study of Race and Equity in Education, and is a doctoral candidate in leadership, administration, and policy at the George Washington University. So Adjoa, that is a great background, many, many accolades, much to be admired. So we really, really thank you for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I have never had my full bio read before, so I thank you for doing all of that. A snippet would have been just as nice, but thank you so much.
No, I wanted to give you all of your flowers, right? So I said, you know what? It is long, but I'm going to read it because what can I decide? What could I have left out, right? So I wanted to do you justice. So thank you to our listeners for listening through that. And thank you for, again, sharing your time and expertise with us today. So this month, we celebrated the C.R.O.W.N Act and bringing awareness to that. And that's why it was so important and so special for me to have you here as one of the main people that introduced that to us, and wanted to get some feedback, some thoughts from you as to why it was created and how did you kind of come about that?
Well, thank you so much for the kind, albeit long introduction. I genuinely do appreciate it. And while virtually, it is very good to be here, especially talking about something so near and dear to my heart. I wear quite a few hats, as you sort of went through in reading my bio. But as it relates to our conversation today, about the anti-hair discrimination movement that is known as the C.R.O.W.N Act, I am proud to be the all things racial equity champion who developed the legislative strategy for and who leads the nationwide grassroots advocacy efforts to pass the C.R.O.W.N Act on behalf of the C.R.O.W.N Coalition, which was co-founded by Dove and the National Urban League and Color of Change and others. Racial discrimination in the form of hair discrimination is much more prevalent than many people who have not been on the receiving end of this type of discrimination may think. You know, better than I perhaps, anti-Blackness is pervasive, and for most of the country's existence, it has been perfectly legal. For additional context, all of my work is rooted in fighting anti-Blackness and advancing racial equity, which is really what this movement is about, at least for me personally, in addition to, of course, shifting both policy and culture. The movement, as it has become, I should note, was really, it came out of a conversation that was had, that I had personally with 3 other Black women. A.C. Eggleston-Bracey, who is an executive and really embodies what it means to be a socially responsible corporate executive. My pen house sister, a sorority sister of mine, Kelly Richardson Lawson, who is a creative genius, and one of my West African sisters, Orlena Wonka Blanchard. And we had this conversation during Essence Festival back in 2018, which you know is the ultimate sort of Black girls rock, Black women lead, sort of celebration of all that we are, from beauty to brains, sort of that, you know, sort of whole entire environment. And we had a conversation about inclusive beauty, the need for more inclusive beauty, in addition to really tackling this longstanding problematic practice of race-based hair discrimination. So the one sister has resources in terms of supporting, you know, the PR and the marketing. One is really, again, a creative genius who sort of is like, I'm going to tackle the imagery. And so when you see the, you know, beautiful images of Black women rocking fros and locks and twists, that really comes out of her agency that she started with the other sister, Orlena, called Joy Collective. And none of them sort of work in, you know, politics or policy or do that work. And so that's sort of the hat that I wear as someone who works at both the intersection of policy and politics. So we really sketched out what this would look like. There would be other Black women that have been tapped. A sister, Melanie, who's a whiz with all things art. She created the Crown Girl logo. And another sister, Marcy Polanco, who really has done her thing in terms of the PR, because mainstream media was not really talking about race-based hair discrimination. So long story short, this conversation came out of, this movement, I should say, came out of a conversation that was had at Essence Festival back in 2018.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. I mean, when Black girls get together, right? The magic, absolutely. So why is this significant? And I think that a lot of us may know that we experience it, but maybe we don't have the words to articulate it, or maybe we don't trust ourselves to know that it has happened. So how can we become more aware of what it looks like in the workplace? And then also, how do we start to communicate around that so that we can advocate?
Well, thank you for that question. And you are absolutely right. You remind me of something that Dr. Janetta Besh-Cole says, and that's when Black women gather. And so that's exactly what happened when we were in my favorite American city, New Orleans, back in 2018. Black hair, has been discriminated against for so long, which makes us having this conversation in Louisiana, where it used to be legal to make us cover our hair. That, as the backdrop for this conversation, just adds another layer to it. But Black hair has been discriminated against. Black bodies have been policed. Our hair has been obviously wrongly deemed unprofessional. These Eurocentric grooming policies and standards that are allegedly race neutral, they serve as a reason or excuse, you could say, for countless Black people having been passed over for promotions, having offers of employment rescinded, and even being fired. This really prevalent form of discrimination not only makes for a toxic workplace culture, but it inevitably impacts the upward mobility of the individuals and the families that are impacted. So you're talking about having my financial standing be impacted by the way my hair grows out of its head, or, my decision to wear my hair in a protective style in alignment with, who I am. In a world that is often difficult to thrive in and is not always kind, we'll say, to Black women, Black people in general, in the ways in which we deserve, we really need to ensure that we are protecting and preserving our happiness. That is a caveat, of course, just in light of what's happening in the world right now. We see what's happening in the Olympics, but we really need to ensure that we are protecting and preserving our rights to rock our crowns. In terms of identifying race-based hair discrimination, there's no, sort of one size fits all. It may be a comment about your hair having been pretty the other day when it was straight. So today, I have a blowout. I'm natural, but I have a blowout, but I've rocked an afro. I've worn braids. I've worn twists. I wear twists out often. But really our decision to do what we want to do with hair is what we are working to preserve and to protect. So if you believe that you have been a victim of race-based hair discrimination, and I emphasize race-based because I've heard people who don't really understand what the C.R.O.W.N Act is, which I'll take a minute to just explain. What the C.R.O.W.N Act is, it is a legislative fix to the issue of race-based hair discrimination. And I stress again, race-based, because it's really not about hair color or even hair length, although we see sometimes people will use that as a proxy to discriminate against, but it's really not about that. It is really the tightly coiled and curly ways in which our hair grows, or the protective styles that we wear to really maintain the health of our hair, or even just to sport it because it's, it's in alignment with who we are as a people. That has been the reason that not only in the workplace that we've seen, a number of different issues, but it's also been the reason that far too many Black children have missed school or have had negative educational experiences. So I think, as I think about the work that I've done at the local, state, and federal levels as an advocate wearing that hat, really in addition to the legislative strategist, I am thinking about a student who was sent home in tears in Louisiana because she wore beautiful box braids that were deemed a violation of school rules. I am thinking about a then boy, now young man, in Texas who testified with me on a panel. I was virtual, he was in person, of course, because of the pandemic, who was told that he could not participate in his graduation ceremony with his friends because of his decision to rock locks, which for him, given his father's identity, was really a source of ethnic pride. I am thinking about a student athlete, a wrestler, a boy wrestler who was told that he had to make a decision no child should ever have to make, especially not on the spot. And that was to choose between having his identity attacked and his locks randomly cut, or to forfeit a match that he had earned the right to participate in. Now, you mentioned that I have some licenses and a couple degrees in psychology, and that's only relevant here because as a clinician who started out working in K-12 education, I know the negative impact that one's school climate and culture can have when it is not welcoming and nurturing. I also understand that your perception really of self-worth can be impacted when you are constantly told that the way that you were born is essentially not okay. You're not good enough. Your hair is not good enough. You don't belong here. That is all extremely problematic. So to put a button on this, because I could obviously talk about this all day, having created the legislative strategy for it and doing this work, it is really important for the workplace, the people in the workplace, and I have to acknowledge in schools as well, to really revisit these grooming standards and these dress code policies that really reinforce this Eurocentric standard of beauty, because they are in fact problematic for the people who don't meet that standard and who, you know, refuse to conform. So people can certainly get involved by going to thecrownact.com to sign the petition and help this pass at the federal level. New York happens to be the first state where the legislature actually passed the C.R.O.W.N. Act. California certainly the first to introduce it, but it was New York then Assemblywoman Tremaine Wright who really championed this bill in the state of New York, making it the first legislature to pass it. And so with that, I do encourage everyone to get involved, to sign the petition, and to contact your federal lawmakers to ensure that they know that you want to see this passed federally to extend statutory protection to those who are not in a state where the bill has passed.
Wonderful, Adjoa. I mean, you said a mouthful. I mean, and you really touched me personally. Growing up as a little girl of color with Black hair and not feeling good enough at times if my hair wasn't processed right, if it wasn't fixed right, and I remember refusing to go to school because of that, or refusing to be in public because of that. And even as a woman coming into the working world and not wanting to, wanting to make sure on interviews that I create a particular presentation of professionalism as it relates to my hair and my dress and my attire. So I think it is so important to have these legislative laws, but also have these conversations to start to encourage Black girls and boys or people of color or people with different hair to start to understand that it is not unprofessional to wear your hair, and you should not be afraid. That should not be connected to your abilities or your job and your pay, as you stated. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate your insights and you being here with us today. I hope that we can stay connected and I can continue to learn from your guidance. So thank you on behalf of Monroe County, and we definitely look forward to you being one of our close partners.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. But happy to also just correspond with you if people think of a question after this is over. I'm happy to answer it.
Perfect. Let's see, we can go to Matt. Matt, are there any questions in the chat?
No, not at this time. We did get a question early. What is the C.R.O.W.N. Act? And I did put that acronym in the chat box for all to see.
Okay. Wonderful.
I was going to say I should probably clarify what the C.R.O.W.N. Act is beyond the acronym. So yes, the acronym is certainly creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, of course, including protective styles, but I should just delve a little bit deeper into that and explain what it's not in addition to what it is. So what it is it amends the existing definition of race in the respective codes to include traits that are historically associated with it. So there are assumptions that our hair is covered under the current classification of race. And in the absence of the C.R.O.W.N. Act, that is not the case. So it does not create a new protected class. Again, it amends the definition of race, acknowledging that race is a social construct. We do not define race beyond saying whatever you think race is as per written in your code, amend that definition to include the language. It includes the traits historically associated with it. So it does not create a new protected class. Race is already a protected class. It does not interfere at all with OSHA regulations on the workplace safety front. All rules that are imposed for reasons related to safety per the industry remain in place. The C.R.O.W.N. Act does not supersede that. So for example, if one has to wear a hairnet at your job, then braids can be worn in a hairnet. It's that simple. Braids can be worn in a hairnet. Again, it's not really about color or length, acknowledging that sometimes people sort of confuse the two. So it's not about, for example, lime green ponytails. That wouldn't be a race-based issue versus, a decision to, again, rock your crown however you see fit. But this particular movement is about extending statutory protection against those who are typically discriminated against based on, race-based traits. The C.R.O.W.N. Act does not create an environment where business owners who do not discriminate will face frivolous lawsuits. I heard that, it's going to create this litigious environment. Not if you're not discriminating against people based on, their hair. The burden of proof is still on the person who is bringing forth the claim. So the person has to prove that, which can be a task and a high threshold to meet. So business owners who don't discriminate based on hair will not have anything at all to worry about and should support this. It does not cost anything. So there's no fiscal impact. There's no, fiscal note attached to this bill. It's completely free to not discriminate against people based on their hair texture or protective styles. And then lastly, I'll just note and then pass the mic, and thank you for having me, is the data show that having a more inclusive and more equitable work environment is actually also good for the bottom line. So racism has been proven to be a very bad business model. When people feel valued and included and there is true diversity and there's an equitable environment, that is actually good for business. So I just wanted to add that since that question was asked, beyond the acronym creating a respectful and open world for natural hair to include, of course, protective styles, because sometimes people think, I've heard the argument, well, it's not natural if you have, extensions because that's not your hair. And you can have both. So I can have my hair natural and braided to preserve the health of my hair and still be natural. So I just wanted to add that just as I sort of wrap to ensure that people fully understand what the bill actually does and what it does not do.
Thank you so much.
I see one question. Do you mind if I answer this one question?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, it says, please discuss the extent to which this is also an issue for Black males and other non-white males with similarly textured hair, their non-conforming hairstyles in the workplace. Thank you so much, Robert, for that question. This issue is disproportionately impacts Black women. I should note, for additional context, it was now Madam Secretary Marcia Fudge, it was then Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who during her tenure as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, along with her colleagues, penned a letter to the then Secretary of Defense calling out the inherent racial and gender bias in a proposed ban that the then Secretary of Defense was proposing against certain hairstyles that Black women historically wear. signed by all of the members of, all of the female members of the Congressional Black Caucus, they decided to rethink such a policy. That was the first time, just for a historical note, that I am aware of that any lawmaker took action. It wasn't a bill, but it certainly was lawmakers acknowledging the inherent gender and racial bias in such a manner. We'll say that. It disproportionately impacts Black women, that goes without saying, but not exclusively. Not only because Black women and Black men and Black children are inextricably linked, but those who identify as brown can have similarly textured hair. I've heard people from the Jewish community talk about the texture in that same vein. So the issue is disproportionately impacts Black women, but not exclusively. So aside from the fact that we're all inextricably linked, there are obviously Black men. Two of the examples that I gave when I talked about, particularly in the school environment, those are two Black boys who wear locks. So it certainly impacts them as well. And I should note that this is a Black women-led movement, but it certainly takes a diverse coalition, a multiracial, intergenerational coalition to really move us as a society. Yesterday, I did an event virtual with members in Massachusetts, and there is Representative Altrino, a white male whose two constituents faced race-based hair discrimination, and so he was the one to introduce the bill. So this is a nonpartisan issue. All elected officials in general, should feel a sense of responsibility to really preserve and protect people's civil rights, independent of party affiliation, independent of racial identity, because again, it is something that we all should feel an obligation to really push forward. But I did want to take time to acknowledge that question, that no, it is certainly not only Black women who are impacted, certainly Black men, Black children, Black and brown. And again, I've heard cases where people who don't identify as either, but who identify as Jewish, having had similar experiences in regards to their natural texture.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Adjoa. I just have one last comment that was left, and it says, thank you. It is amazing how this also impacts our social engagement within our own culture growing up, whereby the straightening comb to fit into society. Absolutely, it is definitely an icon and a cultural artifact. I remember having the discussion when I decided to embrace my sister locks. So thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And we also sometimes have to just be mindful that, you know, sometimes we reinforce stereotypes and standards that aren't always conducive to our growth also. So anti-Blackness, and this is me speaking in my personal capacity, anti-Blackness is again pervasive. And so I think Sister LaTanya knows what that means. So we have to make sure that we're lifting ourselves and recognizing that the African aesthetic and African features are also beautiful. It should certainly be lifted.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, again, Adjoa, thank you so much on behalf of my office and the county. And again, we are looking forward to our partnership with you.
Thank you so much for having me. Everyone have a great day. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All righty, guys. So thank you so much for participating and engaging in that discussion. I am going to move it on as we continue our discussion around ADA. I will turn it over to our EEO manager, Cheryl Hayward.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to continue the discussion about legislation that prevents discrimination and the laws that support the free action of non-discriminating. And we're going to start with the Americans Disability Awareness Act. So there are two things that happened this month that introduced us and encouraged us to think about people living with disabilities. The first was Disability Awareness Day, and that happened on June 14th this year. Now, this day was really just an opportunity for the community, the disabled community, to celebrate who they are, but it was also a time to learn how to better understand how you can become an ally in the disabled community members. As you can see, there's a graph there that just kind of highlights some of the numbers that happens for individuals living, and there's 6 noted disabilities that are identified through the federal government: hearing, ambulatory, vision, self-care, cognitive, and independent living. So let's talk about the ADA Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and what that is and how does it support individuals living with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law in July 26, 1990. Its purpose is to make American society more accessible to people with disabilities. In 2008, the ADA Amendments Act, which is the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act, also known as the ADAAA, I know it's a mouthful, but that's what it is, was passed as well. And that initiated some more protections for individuals with disabilities. Now, what is it exactly? So the ADA defines a person with a disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. This includes individuals who have a record of such an impairment, even if they do not currently identify as having a disability. It also includes individuals who do not have a disability, but are regarded as having a disability. And I'll give you some examples a little while later. The ADA also makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person based on that person's association with another individual who has a disability. So what does that look like? So individuals who meet the ADA's definition of disabilities are those who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of his or her major life activities. He or she has a record of such an impairment, or he or she is regarded as having such an impairment. Now, earlier I talked about the ADAAA Act, the Amendment Act, which went into effect, as I said, in 2009. This added additional protections for certain individuals under certain circumstances. And those circumstances include those such as parents who have an association with an individual known to have a disability, and to those who are coerced or subjected to retaliation for assisting people with disabilities in asserting their rights under the American with Disabilities Act. So again, this is legislation that prevents us and encourages us not to discriminate. Now, why is this important for you to know, for me to tell you, and really for me to know as well? Well, disability impacts all of us. I'm going to give you some quick numbers just to highlight how that may be. As again, we have the graph just showing some forms of disabilities, but there's 61 million people in the United States that have one or more form of a disability. This is the largest minority in the country. 26% of the total population has a disability. So that's 1 in 4 Americans that may show a physical or non-physical disability. Of that, 19% of that population are ages 18 through 65. And why I focused on that number was because that's usually when someone's entering the workforce or potentially exiting the workforce, right? So I really wanted you to think about who may be showing up for you doing a recruitment event, a job application, an interview, so that you're conscious that this person may or may not show a disability, but there's a potential that 1 in 4 of those people that you interview may in fact have a disability. Disability is especially common in these groups: older adults, women, and minorities. In fact, 2 in 5 adults aged 65 years and older have a disability. 1 in 4 women have a disability. 2 in 5 non-Hispanic American Indians, Alaska Natives have a disability. So you see, there's quite a few, and this is where disability really, really impacts all of us if we think about it. And I'm sure if we think of it, we can definitely say we know someone who is living with a disability. Under the Americans with Disability Act, they identify 5 titles or 5 umbrellas to really define what the limitations are where people cannot discriminate. The first, we have under Title I, employment. This requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations for applicants and employees with disabilities, and it prohibits the discrimination on the basis of a disability in all aspects of employment. The second is public services, right? Public services must provide access to individuals with disabilities, nor can they deny services to people with disabilities or deny their participation in programs or activities that are available to people without disabilities. That includes public transportation, transit buses, access to in and out of buildings. The third, public accommodations. This requires that all new construction and modifications must be accessible to individuals with disabilities. So for existing facilities, barriers to services must be removed if readily achievable. This applies to all size businesses. So it doesn't matter if you have 1 employee or 5,000 employees, you have to make sure that an individual living with a disability has access to your services and your building. The fourth is telecommunications. Telecommunications companies offering telephone service to the general public must have a telephone relay service to individuals who use telecommunication devices for the deaf, so like TTYs or similar devices. And then there's a miscellaneous category, and that really just says it prohibits any discrimination based on coercion or threatening, retaliating against individuals with disabilities, or those attempting to aid people with disabilities in asserting their rights under the American Disabilities Act. Earlier, you mentioned that the employment also talked about reasonable accommodations. And so let me tell you what that is. A reasonable accommodation is any change or adjustment to a job or work environment that permits an applicant or employee with a disability to participate in the job application process, to perform the essential duties of a job, or to enjoy the benefits and privileges of employment equal to those without disabilities. Some examples of modification, and this is just a short list, right? So there's other opportunities based on your needs that modifications may be made, but I just wanted to give you a quick example. First, acquiring or modifying equipment and or devices, physical change to a workstation or access to a building, modifying training materials. So what's the employer responsibility? It is the responsibility of your employer to ensure that all facilities are accessible to qualified applicants and employees with disabilities as a reasonable accommodation, unless it would cause an undue hardship. What's undue hardship, you're probably thinking? Well, it's defined again under the ADA as an action requiring significant, difficult, or expensive change when considered in light of a number of factors. These factors include the nature and the cost of the accommodation in relation to the size, the resources, and the structure of the employee's operation. So that's the employer's responsibility. So that would be Monroe County's responsibility. What's your responsibility? The individual with the disability, it is your responsibility to request an accommodation. It's also your responsibility to provide the appropriate and sufficient documentation to ensure that your employer understands what the needs are, understands what your doctor may be requesting or suggesting that you use to ensure that you're successful in accomplishing your duties. Now, what's the process in Monroe County? First, you're going to reach out to Ebony Burgess, the ADA manager for the county, at the email ada@monroecounty.gov. And I encourage you to provide as much information as possible when you send that email. And information could be what you're hoping to have modified, what equipment you may need, and any documentation that you have from your physician will definitely support the process for her. And I'm going to encourage Ebony to jump in at this point, at any point, if I'm missing something and giving you the process. But we're also looking at reviewing what that process looks like, not to make it any more difficult, but to ensure that we are able to document everything that we're doing and everything that you're asking for. And I believe it's also where Ebony would be communicating with you back and forth, maybe coming out, seeing what you need, working with your supervisor. And again, confidentiality is maintained in the appropriate format to ensure that your privacy is maintained, but as well as that we make sure that your needs are getting achieved as required. Her phone number directly is 753-2406. But before I go, I mentioned Disability Awareness Days and ways that you can become an ally in supporting individuals with disabilities. And here's just a couple of things that you can do. Remember that there's 1 in 4 Americans with disability. So about 25% of the people that you meet may have a disability, whether you can see it or not. Remember, they can be invisible or not visible. So it could be from a wheelchair all the way to a learning disability like dyslexia or ADHD, things of that nature. Be your usual self, right? Don't speak differently. Don't yell unless the individual may say, I'm hard of hearing, could you yell, right? But be yourself. Avoid staring or making awkward jokes. Don't speak slower or louder than usual. Again, unless this individual says, I have a hearing impairment, then you may have to adjust your volume in your speech. And lastly, allow the individual to inform you of their needs while interacting with them. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. Again, just to echo what Ms. Asamoah said, discrimination is something that you can do without a cost. It is free. So now I'm going to send you over to, I think, is it Dr. D or Ebony? Ebony. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that information about ADA. You covered pretty much everything. I would strongly encourage folks that if you do have accommodation, please, the fastest way to get the process going is to get a medical from your doctor. So once I have that medical with the specifics as to what it is that you need, we can come out and do an assessment if necessary, but most importantly, getting the equipment that you need so that we can accommodate you, because we want to make sure that you have all the tools and resources that you need in order to be successful on the job. So thank you, Cheryl, for going over that. So I want to talk to you all today about social wellness awareness. This month in July is Social Wellness Awareness Month. So social wellness or social well-being, it refers to the development of a positive relationship with other people. Our social health is often an indicator of our emotional and physical well-being. So now you're probably thinking, why are we talking about this stuff at work? Well, it ties into work. So I just want to give you a few things about social well-being. What it is being yourself authentically. So being able to show up to work as your whole self. You don't have to pretend to be someone else. Balancing your social and personal time. So being able to be socially engaged, with other people, but also knowing that you have to take time to have that alone time with yourself. Being able to set boundaries, with people. It's okay. That's healthy actually to set boundaries with folks, whether it's inside or outside of work. By doing so, it's setting up for healthy relationships and conversations and having a support system. So some facts and stats on social wellness. Socially isolated people are more susceptible to illness and have a death rate of 2 to 3 times higher than those who are not socially isolated. People who maintain their social network and support systems do better under stress. So again, having that support system, your stress levels are decreased because you have people who you can turn to in your circle that you can talk to, and they're trusted folks, they're your safe haven. Also, approximately 20% of Americans feel lonely and isolated during their free time. So again, when you don't have social wellness and you just keep to yourself, It's not a good thing. And like I said, 20%, that's a lot. You know, it may seem like a little, but 20% of Americans feeling isolated. You know, I don't know about you, but I like being around a company of good people. Also, the Harvard study of adult development found that the quality of social relationships mattered more than the quantity. So again, you know, you may be a person who may be an introvert or, you know, just really like to keep to yourself and you don't want a whole bunch of friends. It's not about the amount of people that you have around you, but the quality of those relationships. Are they healthy relationships? Are they giving you what you need in order to strive and thrive, you know, in a workplace? So just keeping that in mind. Also, according to Mayo Clinic, adults with strong social support have a reduced risk of many significant health problems, including depression, high blood pressure, and an unhealthy body mass index. So again, staying healthy, having that circle where you can go out and exercise with folks, taking walks, eating healthy. You know, sometimes that can be a negative impact if you're eating too much, but you know, again, you want to make sure that you're doing a healthy lifestyle. Also, research by Sean Aker found that having social connections is a helpful predictor of reduced stress. And laughter is good medicine. Those that know me know that, you know, my philosophy is laughter a day, you know, keeps the doctor away. So it's important that you laugh, have a good time, you know, it induces those endorphins to just keep you going and have positive energy. And also cholesterol levels go up when human companionship is lacking. So when you don't have that companionship, you know, of a healthy relationship or someone, you know, who you can bounce things off of, you know, your cholesterol goes up. That's not good for your health. So it's good to stay connected to folks. And overall, it gives you a strong social network and it create a good mood and enhance your self-esteem. So we want to make sure that you connect with your coworkers and establish trust and respect for one another. You want to be active by finding something that enjoy doing, like dancing, walking, exercising. You want to take notice, asking if a coworker is okay. So again, being mindful and being aware of, you know, your coworkers, you know, in the office, you know, and knowing what their norm is and what their norm isn't. You know, if you see someone that they look like they're a little off that day, it's okay. Take notice to that. You know, ask them, are you okay? You know, is there anything that I can help you with? Keep learning. Again, we learn from one another. Be open to new ideas. You may discover that you find something that you like, you know, just by learning from one another. And be giving of your time, your words, your presence. You never know what people are going through, so be kind. So how you feel and perform at your workplace, it depends significantly on your social wellness. Your social wellness depends on the relationships and your social connections that you have from work. So I want to ask you, you know, let's do a social wellness check-in. Are you able to ask for help when needed? Do you surround yourself with positive people that you can trust? Are you able to communicate clearly when dealing with conflict? Do you have at least one person that you can trust in a time of need? And did you know that as an employee, you can utilize the Employee Assistance Program, EAP, and it's for free? All you have to do is contact 276-9110, and you can set up an appointment, or you can schedule an appointment online at the link below. So again, this is a lot about social wellness awareness this month, and we want to make sure that you're taking time to build a social, solid support network that contributes to your emotional well-being. And a little extra effort in building these relationships will ensure that you have a trusted group of people who look out for you in success as well as in your failure. And with the presence of a positive relationship that reciprocates your respect, trust, and admiration, your overall wellness and mood and self-esteem will witness a significant peak. So be well, my friends.
Thank you, Ebony. Your information is very important. It's very important that we take care of ourselves and little things that make a difference, and we can enjoy our day at work and outside of work as well. So thank you for the valuable information that you provided. Now I would like to take this opportunity to look at some feedback that we received from the June town hall. I want to encourage you to continue to send your feedback even after the session. We are open to receive your messages or suggestions in regards of what you would like to see, what subjects would you like us to discuss, and if there's any information that we can assist you with, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So right now we're gonna look at some of the feedback from June. So the first question is, will there be some information or training in the near future on non-binary pronouns and how to handle these in the workplace? As a supervisor, I want to understand it better, to educate my team and ensure I am communicating with my colleagues and internal customers professionally and correctly.
All right, thank you so much, Jesus. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Ebony, for providing that great information, as well as this question that has come up several times. I have been in conversation with the county exec around ensuring that we have ways to display our preferred pronouns, whether it be on email, whether it be on our name tags, and things of that nature, as well as ensuring that we have some gender neutral bathrooms in different places like that to account for our gender differences. We are also, as the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, working on creating a guide so that you guys kind of know what this looks like in your work environment and how you can be supported or support those of different gender preferences. So definitely something we intend to inform and train on, and also in our work environments, make people aware of those differences.
Thank you, Dr. Kimber. The next question is, does ageism fall under the purview of this office?
Yes. So when we think about discrimination at all levels, we are here to protect people against their human rights being discriminated against. So all of those different things will fall into the purview of this office.
Very good. The next one, I think this one is the feedback. I look forward to employee education / training on microaggression. I'm afraid that many employees commit microaggression and just aren't aware of it. And the recipient employees feel like they can speak up.
Yeah, and I think that the answer to that question is yes, or I agree. It wasn't a question, more of a comment, but I agree. Microaggressions are one of the biggest barriers to inclusive in environments where people feel as though they are welcome. So that is definitely something that we will be bringing awareness to, and also helping people to communicate around and through those instances of microaggressions where communication and relationships have been broken down. So great comment, I agree.
Very good. And our last comment is, I thought that the town hall went really well and touched on many different aspects of DE&I. I like going through different holidays and hearing from each member of the department. I'm looking forward to the future town hall to learn more. Again, thank you very much for your feedback. And if you would like to our team to discuss or speak about a specific subject, please let us know, and we would like to share that information with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus. I think we skipped over one question in regards to the newsletter and recruitment strategies. And yes, we are working to make sure we are developing some tools for leaders. So that is something to be on the lookout for. All righty, Daddy. Thank you, Jesus. Now we want to move on to any questions or comments that have come up in the chat. And I'll turn it over to Matt to kind of read those for us.
Yes, we've had one question came in earlier, and this would probably go to Cheryl and to Ebony. How do anxiety disorders work under ADA, and what sort of rights do I have?
Oh, yeah, yes, I can answer that. With accommodations as it pertains to anxiety underneath ADA, the person would need to get a medical from their doctor. Again, I wouldn't be able to answer specifics because a lot of things will take into consideration what's their job title, what type of accommodations are they looking for. So yes, if a person has anxiety and they're looking for accommodations, please reach out to your healthcare physician to get a medical and then send it over to me, and then we can work on it from there.
Great. And just one more, and this is more of a comment. This came in earlier this week. The email invitation includes numerous acronyms that I'm totally unaware of the meanings of them, like ODEI, ADA, C.R.O.W.N. The email is very confusing, and I'm tempted to ignore rather than research why I should participate. And I believe we can fix that pretty easy. Thanks for your question. I hope you're on the call today. We will definitely look at our messaging to make sure that we are spelling these things out and that communication is very clear for people that aren't familiar with certain terms that we use. Dr. Kimbrel, that was the last question.
Okay, great. And I see a comment here in the comment section in regards to preferred pronouns. And thank you so much, Bonnie Smith, for pointing that out. It is the pronouns and it is the gender and not preferred. So thank you so much for bringing that to our awareness. Thank you. All righty. So some updates. We'll turn it over to Amber for the updates.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up, we're going to talk about what's next. ODEI, for the person that asked the question, means Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And we already talked about what ADA and C.R.O.W.N. Act mean. As far as what's next, we'd like to get some feedback as far as what you would like to hear about from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. What topics would you like to hear about? What's important to you? What would you like for us to discuss? Send us an email to mcdei@monroecounty.gov. I will have that up on the next slide. But we want to hear back from you, not just feedback according to what town halls we've already done. We want to know what you guys want to hear about, because we want to make sure that this is an inclusive environment. We want to make sure that we're touching on the topics that are important to everyone else as well, as far as DE&I are concerned. For August, we will be talking about Black women's equal pay as well as women's equality, as August is Women's Equality Month. There are several different focuses in August that we will be sending out with our August publication, as well as the calendar for August. So just be on the lookout for that in the next week. And we will be doing, the last Wednesday of every month will be our July Town Hall. So if you want to mark that calendar, we will maintain the same time, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. The last Wednesday of every month, we will send the communications out, excuse me, with the registration links at least two to three times a month, so that everyone has an opportunity to get their questions in, get registered, and have that on their calendar. The Cultural Awareness Committee. If you're interested, I can share more information. Please just shoot me a quick email, ambermedley@monroecounty.gov. I can give you more information about that. We are developing a team right now, and I'm excited for what's to come with that. Like I said before, keep in touch with us. mcdei@monroecounty.gov. You can share your thoughts, your feedback, any questions you may have. We'll also be sharing a link where you can share your feedback anonymously, or you can ask any questions that you may have anonymously, or you can give us a call, 753-2400, or come and visit us. City Place, 50 West Main Street, 7th floor, 7131 is our office suite number. Thank you, everyone.
Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us, and a special thanks to the team, to the ODI team. You guys did a great job, and I'm so happy to have you all and share this information with Monroe County every month. So thank you for all the work that you guys are doing to put this on, and thank you all for taking your time, especially during lunchtime, to listen, be a part of this conversation, and we're looking forward to seeing you again next month. Have a great day.